5 days in orientation, where one day we went down to the garage and worked in the garage, and next day we worked with the electricians and mechanics. The following day we went to the alarm board and worked there. The next day we worked in the Arson Investigation Bureau, and then we were taken out on the apparatus floor, handed a coat, helmet, and boots, and said, follow an old guy, get a hold of his coat, and don't let go. Learn all you can.
Now, I know you brought up the alarm board. Were those dispatchers in the alarm board like they are today, or were they firefighters?
When I hired on, they were firefighters who left the department for various reasons, they actually wrote tests to become alarm operators, and at that time, a lot of the time they only had one operator on duty. They'd still dispatch the stations by telephone. They had a telephone switchboard, and they still dispatched that way.
What was the starting wage for your when you started?
I started at $6,700 a year.
And then when you retired as battalion chief?
40, I believe around 42,000.
Do you remember your first fire?
First fire I had was a semi, the very first fire. It wasn't a structure, it was a semi-tractor trailer, and Carl Kukla was my captain. Bernie McGuire was my co-worker. I don't remember who the driver was. I believe it was Kenny Height. And back then we didn't have masks, and we went into the back of the tractor trailer, and it was filled with black smoke. And when we got in, I bumped into a bank of oxyacetylene tanks lined up, strapped to the wall on one side, and the trailer was full of car seats that for some reason had been taken out of cars, and it was full of those, and it was all that black, what you're used to, the plastic smoke. And when we bumped into the tanks and it was rolling pretty good, I panicked and grabbed Bernie and started pulling his coat and telling him there's oxyacetylene over here, and he said yeah, and we just kept working, and no big deal. So wow. That was my first fire.
So that probably opened your eyes wide open to just how dangerous this job really is. And you said that you didn't typically have a tank?
No, no. When we had the first SCBAs came in pretty close to 1967, and they had one on a truck. We still had Burrell masks, Chemox, and the old fresh air mask. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Or
I think I have seen one.
Fresh air mask was, you know,
Oh no, I hadn't seen that.
It's set up the same as the divers on a ship, the diving bell. You've seen the old movies where a guy stands there and cranks the big wheel like that, and the thump, 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 thump. Yeah. And only they had a bell that they wore. With this one, there was two hoses, an inhalation and an exhalation hose. And they came in and went to the bottom of the mask, and you put this mask on, and you had to drag this hose in to the fire with you, which obviously no one wore. And then we had Burrell and Chemox masks, but nobody wore those either, so consequently no one wore masks. And if you wore one, you were considered kind of a wussy, sort of.
All right, well, thinking back to your years of service, how many years of service did you have? I'm sorry.
24.
24 years. What was your most memorable moment? I know there's probably a bunch, but do you have any one that sticks out?
Oh, I think probably like all firefighters, either your biggest fire or possibly the most tragic fire. And I think the most tragic fire we had was in the North End when we had 9 children die in a fire. And standing out with that is the fire that really initiated the ambulance service in the city of Flint. It's a fire that was the root cause of us going after an ambulance service within the fire department. Those two probably stand out more than anything.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the ambulance, because I think that's very important to the history. It began in '77, is that correct?
Actually, '76 was when we all took the we all took the training, and it was under the direction of Dr. Bob Rathburn, who has since passed away, and Chief Roy Smythe. And initially there were 150 some firefighters that took the training, and we all took the training, and we took all of the exams throughout the training, and when we got all done, we got ready to take our state boards, and the state came in and said, you took the wrong training, we can't give you the boards, so you've got to retake it all. Well, out of the 150 some that took the original course, only 50 of us said we'd do it again, and so that's why they lost some of the impetus, some of the enthusiasm they had for the training. But initially there were about 50 or 56 of us that ended up taking the state boards.
And then after that, shortly, we got the first EMS system that was supplied by the Flint Fire Department.
We had, the first run was September 22nd, I believe, or 26th. And it was a young lady in an automobile accident on Ballinger Highway. And that initiated the EMS service. Mayor Jim Rutherford bought the first ambulance and provided it out of his wages. And from then we went on to a second rig and then a third.
Well, obviously we've come full circle with EMS here, unfortunately.
I understand that.
Thinking back, I know that you played some roles in EMS throughout your career, is that correct?
Yes.
What specific role? I mean,
well, being in the original group, the first 156, and then sticking it out with the second 56, riding the EMS rig, I was one of the few officers. I was a sergeant, and one of the few officers that stuck with it. Not too many officers were enthused about doing medical work. They were firefighters, and at that time that was kind of a logical attitude. And then in 1970, late 78, Chief Smythe asked if I'd be interested in becoming a paramedic. And so in 1978 we started paramedic training, and we graduated from that in 1979 November, and by that time I had been promoted to lieutenant. So I was still in the program and hung in there. Then I became EMS coordinator, assistant training officer, and stayed with the program for 12 and a half years.
Great. So you watched the first, the advent of the first echo units in the city of Flint.
Right.
Well, echo unit. I think at one time we did have two.
Right.
In the span of the career, or span of time here. What do you think was the single most important innovation in fire service throughout your tenure?
Single most important innovation?
Or you can couple a few.
I'd have to say that the most important thing that's happened in the fire service, in my estimation, has been the recognition by those who are empowered, the chiefs, assistant chiefs, for the important the fact that formalized training, that we have training schedules, we meet certain training criteria, so that we're all working off the same page, that each individual knows what the guy behind him is going to do. And we've always been able to depend on one another. We've always been able to know that if my life is in your hands, I know you're going to take good care of me. But the formalized training now lets me know exactly how you're going to do it.
How big was the department when you hired in?
We had 23 personnel at Station 1, 16 at Station 2, and 9 in each of the outstation. I believe we were one person shy of the same number of footage. There were ladders on the aerial truck, and there was 307 foot of ladder on the aerial truck. We had 306 employees.
306. And when you retired, it's not quite 306 anymore.
No, not quite. Closer to the 6, actually.
What did you miss most about retiring?
The same thing I think Bob Smith did, the camaraderie, the friendships that I developed while I was here, and retirement isn't easy, and at that time the fire department was going through transition. There were a lot of changes being made, and some of those changes, as you can see, are what you're living through now are the results of those changes. And I think the thing I miss the most about it is both the camaraderie and a lot of the good things that are happening. And I know it's hard to overlook a lot of the bad and look at the good, but there's a lot of good stuff happening in your department. I look at the people like yourself and the assistant chief who were just puppies when I was here, and I see what ideas are coming from the younger group, and you guys are you're the fire in it. You're the thing that's going to make it happen, and you're making it happen. Some of the work I've seen you do, some of the work and training that I've seen Assistant Chief Elizondo do. Those are the things that I think I miss the most, being in that loop, if you want to say it. And I always liked the action, good or bad. Right. The arguments were just as good as the fun time, and we always had a lot of fun in the fire service. We always had a sense of humor. It was the most important thing in your career, is a good sense of humor.
Well, speaking of sense of humor, can you...
Oh no, don't go there.
You know, can you just maybe tell the story about Michigan State came in to do one of the, you talk about training was important. The state, remember when they came in and did that bomb training, and you and Terry?
Oh, I like that reaction you gave too.
Well, we had actually at the time this happened was at the onset of all of the bomb scares that we have now. Bomb scares were relatively common then. And back then, we had no knowledge of how to deal with them. They had never had a bomb, but people were calling in these scares at hospitals and schools. And so what we would do is we'd respond with a fire truck, and all the firefighters would pile off, and we'd go in and look for a bomb, knowing full well none of us knew what a bomb looked like, but we'd go in and look for a bomb. So the training officer at that time, Don LeDuc, went and received himself formal training on how to adequately and professionally look for bombs. And he came back from his seminar and his training, and he surprised us one morning at roll call. He said, after roll call, I want the entire crew, before you wash your rigs, do your housework or anything, I want the entire crew in the training room, which at that time was the TV room at Station 1. We went over and sat down, and he brought out a chalkboard and drew out the plans, and he had a formal set of plans on how you can't use portable radios because they could ignite the electronics could ignite a bomb. So you had to have runners, and you had to have 3 runners, 1 for each floor, and he had this elaborate layout. It looked like a football scenario, you know, lines drawn here and a guy running here and all this stuff. So he said, now I've got 3 bombs hidden in the station. It's your job to find them, and you'll readily recognize them as bombs if you find them. And as I recall it, I was one of the runners, which I think it was seniority rather than volunteerism. I think I was low seniority. But Terry Coleman and I were runners, and we ran our feet off back and forth, up and down the stairs. And we'd run down the stairs and we'd say, we've got this strange looking so-and-so up in the gym. And he'd say, no, that's not a bomb. Okay, and we'd run back up and tell him it's not a bomb, look elsewhere. And when all was said and done, we found no bombs, 0 bombs. We did poorly. And Don let us know. And the one thing, and he never did tell us where they were. And he said, the one thing that I want you guys to make a commitment to me, and he said, on your professionalism, he said, commit to me that you will not tell tomorrow's crew what we did today in the morning. Please don't tell them. So we all committed. And we did really want to set him up. So that night, Terry Coleman and I spent until 3 o'clock in the morning going around the station making bombs. We took a basketball and poked a hole in it and stuck a piece of rope out of it and wrote bomb number 33 and put it in the gym. We had tennis shoe bombs. We had road fusees that we taped together. Now this is an interesting story too, because we taped some fusees together and put a piece of string sticking out of them and hid them in the battalion chief's I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but you can lift those grates out of the radiators upstairs, and there's a nice little shelf underneath them. And we put these fusees in the battalion chief's room in the radiator. And so we had string hanging down out of the attic over there in the stairwell on the other side. Total, we had like 30-some bombs. So we hung around in the morning when Don told the rest of the crew into the training room. We all just kind of hung around the outside. Crew went in there and he told them about how he was going to set it up, and you got to do all these things. And he said, okay, go get them. And the guys took off, the runners took off, and pretty soon they come back and we found a bomb. Where at? In the gym in the locker. That's not one of my bombs. Well, it says bomb. Well, it's not a bomb. Well, go get it. So they bring down this basketball with bomb 33 printed on the side of it. It didn't take him long to figure it out, and he canceled the training that morning. And he went back to his office, and there was a box addressed to him sitting in front of his door. And it said to Don LeDuc, and he opened it up, and inside it says, boom, you're dead. You should have checked first. There's a bomb number 40 or something like that. So, but the fusees that we hid in the battalion chief's room, a number of months later, we had forgotten about them because they were under the grill. And at Christmas time, when they used to bring all the toys for tots in here, we used to have a lot of fun testing the toys. That was our job as official testers of the toys. And we had a little locomotive, battery-operated locomotive, that when it hit something, it would change direction. So we took it into the captain's room, which is next door to the battalion chief's room, and when the battalion went to bed and the captain wasn't in his room yet, we lifted his grill out of his radiator and set the little train down in there, turned it on quick, dropped the grill, and ran. So this train is going woo woo, clank, 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 ding, 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 ding in the radiator, and he could hear it. So he lifted his radiator up and looked and saw those fusees and called his police department, and they had the bomb squad come over. And so anyhow, the results of that thing were months in the.
I won't dwell too many of those fun times that you had, but I know that as a result of what you did get here, you were able to further your career, obviously. When I say further the career, so now you're go ahead and tell us what you do now.
Yeah. I'm fire chief in the city of Burton.
And you've been the fire chief there for how long?
7 years.
7 years.
Yep.
At least got 4 more, right?
Yep.
Good for you.
You betcha.
Ellie, can you think of anything else that you'd like to add?
Maybe just the question of being now you have third generation in your family, and
Correct.
what that means to your family.
I think it gives a person a lot of pride to think that your children, would care to follow in your footsteps. I know that when I became a firefighter, it didn't really set in what it meant to me until basically, my father had retired 30 days before I hired on. And it wasn't until later on that you start talking about it and you repeat it more than once and you say, yeah, my dad was a firefighter. And it probably means a great deal more to me now to say, yeah, my dad was a firefighter, my uncle was a firefighter, now my son is a firefighter. It actually even takes me out of the picture, but it gives you a lot of pride to feel that that the profession is worthy of that type of dedication. That entire family would go into it. I don't think the average citizen realizes it, because to me, I know what the dangers are. I know what you guys face on a daily basis. As a chief, I don't face them as much. I don't go in like you do as a firefighter. But I don't think the average citizen, they see the pictures, they hear the stories, they call you a hero, but I don't think they really realize the inherent dangers that we face nowadays in terms of hazardous materials, high voltage electricity, threats with actual hostile environments, including people that are hostile, and your ambulance crews face hostility and stuff. And so to me, it means a lot that my family, or even friends or young people that maybe I had something to do with mentoring when they were still in high school, might care to take up that profession. And so it means a great deal to me, Bob.
Just for the record, I've always wanted to be a firefighter, and one of the things that was available to me when I was in high school was a program called Day on the Job. Well, obviously my day on the job was here at the Flint Fire Department. And when I went to the office over there, they said, go upstairs and ask for the assistant training officer, Doug Halstead. Okay. So I go up the stairs, and there I meet my new mentor. And it was more than what I expected. I expected, yeah, these are the trucks, these are the guys, this is what we do. Have a good day. Doug not only showed me those things, but he actually took me under his wing that day, and we rode in the assistant training officer's car. We went on 2 actual calls. I'll never forget the one call. It's down at the State of Michigan building for a lady that was having trouble breathing, possibly choking. Well, I don't know what was causing her choking incident. I remember the paramedics were Charlie Reeves and Catherine Gardner. And so Doug says, here, get back in the back of the ambulance so you can watch them work. Well, they did a tracheostomy right there. Right in front of my eyes. They cut this lady's throat right there. I never sweated so quick, and my knees buckled, man. And I had to be tough, though, because I wanted to be a firefighter. I couldn't let Doug know that I was sweating. I wanted out of that ambulance so bad, because they actually cut a hole in this lady's throat, and I'm going, this is what we have to do here. So I got back in his car, and I didn't say much for a while there. But I was letting sweat dry. But honestly, I can only thank you again for showing me the ropes and giving me, the step on.
It's funny because out of all the young people you come in contact with in the fire service, the school kids and the ones that stand out, Kenny Harris, who used to work at Station 5 when he was in high school, and became a firefighter, yourself, I can remember your day on the job.
Really?
And I think part of it is the enthusiasm, and part of it is the heart that you give to your day on the job. It's everybody else is interested and wants to hear things, but you want to absorb things. And there's something about it, because I can remember those people as clearly as I remember some of the other people in my career. So.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Real quickly, who's the fire chief when you hired in?
Buford Grable. Oh, actually, I hired in under John Goodwin.
Oh.
But within a very short time, I'd have to check that book, but Bo Grable was chief within a short order.
I understand that he had a certain way about him as a chief. I mean, I've only read things, and in fact, Dennis Murphy emailed me, and when I got the aerial and was telling me some stories, and they called the truck Grable's Yellow Bananas or something like that, about the yellow fire trucks that he introduced to the fire department. Was that a big advent then?
There were quite a few events when, actually, looking at it now and from a different perspective, being a chief and looking back on it, I have a totally different perspective of what Grable did when he was on the fire department. He was a very progressive chief. A lot of what he did wasn't necessarily right, but he was progressive in the sense that there was a lot of things that he wanted to do that our department resisted, because we were still steeped in tradition. We were traditionalists, we always will be, and he wanted to make some changes, and our department wasn't quite ready for changes. So they developed an extremely hostile relationship with the chief at that time. So no matter what he said, if he said, I'm going to put pop in the drinking fountains, they would have resisted it. And not everything he said was good, on the other hand. But I look at it now at some of the things that he initiated, that he inaugurated in this fire department, and he actually, the stuff that he did was for the good of the fire department. And it was just the idea that we were a family, and he wasn't going to start telling us what to do. We were a strong union, one of the strongest in the city, probably the strongest in the city, and so there was a lot of resistance. But looking back on it, I think we could have really benefited by doing a lot of the stuff that he brought forward.
And who was the fire chief when you retired?
When I retired under I'm trying to think. Rich Powell had just left. So who took Rich?
Garrison.
Hmm?
Paul Garrison.
Yeah, Paul Garrison?
Probably when he was just coming in when you did.
Yeah, might have been Paul Garrison then.
Okay, just curious.
maybe just the one thing real quick while you can say goodbye.
I got to smell that.
Thanks for coming down.
One thing about
My son.
big group of blacks that came in, maybe you can just sort of
Ask him about the funny helmet that he had that we're going to have in our museum. It's a blue one, and it's more of a.
It's a Buco police helmet, or Buco motorcycle helmet.
What were those helmets called? Grave about them, and I have one of them. They're yellow round helmets.
Well, the original helmet that he bought was blue, and
Really?
and it was a Buco motorcycle helmet, and he had it locally designed with snaps on the side and had the shield on the back made somewhere, and the shields would crack and they'd pop off, and it was during the riots in 1967, and we wore them because they were riot helmets. And then the guys complained because we all had these terrible to wear, miserable helmets to wear into fires, and one of the chief's drivers got into his car and opened up the trunk and found a helmet that he had specially designed for himself that had wool lining on the inside, very comfortable, and so there was an uprising. So he had a company, then one of the companies started building the same style helmet. It was a riot helmet, but it was designed for firefighting. It had a little lower, it was like these yellow ones that are in the pictures behind us, and they actually made the helmet with the snaps and stuff on it. So
I have one of those, and real quickly, I took my fire truck to the Kids Expo this year, and I displayed firefighting gear from the truck was new to now, and I made a terrible mistake of leaving that helmet out, and some kid must have picked it up and dropped it and cracked the shield right off of it. I was ready to cry. I'm still ready to cry, especially when you tell me that they're like almost one of a kind.
yeah, the David might have one like it. I know he's got, I think, either the blue one or he might have blue and yellow, the ones that I had.
What was your question?
Just the first group of, I know he was here when the first group of females came through, and the first group of, you know, minorities too, after children.
Yeah, so what was it like? Was there the big transition that everybody in our, probably, I'm not gonna say our community, but people foresee when you have this influx of now minorities, like it's 73, I believe they came in or so. Was that something that the fire department had to, it was a huge hurdle, or is this something that we all accepted?
Huge hurdle.
Huge hurdle.
I could do a whole interview on nothing but that.
Really?
When the minorities came aboard in 1972, 71,